Well, hello there, challengees. Welcome to the Always Better Challenge Show, the show that helps you take steps today that lead to being better and happier tomorrow. I'm Joe Bedford, your host. I hope everybody's having a great day. Today's show, well, again, I'm going to start with my quote before I talk about the show. Today's quote is from Frank Sinatra, and the quote is, "Alcohol may be man's worst enemy, but the Bible says, love your enemy." So we're going to start off with a little humor today. And yes, today's show, we're going to talk about alcohol. The title I gave the show is The Alcofluence of Incohol. Little joke. Okay, I got to go ahead and do the thing just because. So I studied poetry in high school and college and probably had to memorize some poems. And do I remember any of those poems? Well, maybe one or two. But here's the poem I do remember. Some of you may have heard this one before. "Starkle, starkle, little twink. Who the hell you are, I think. I'm not under what you call the Alcofluence of Incohol. I'm just a little slort on sheep. I'm not drunk like Thinklepeep. I don't know who is me yet, but the drunker I stand here, the longer I get. Just give me one more drink to fill my cup, because I've got all day sober to Sunday up." So that's the one I remember. So that's a funny one. So yes, we're going to talk about alcohol today. Now, I want to be very careful how I frame this episode, and I want to be very upfront about what I'm trying to do and what I'm not trying to do. This is not a rehash of the quit smoking episode. I am not here to tell everyone to quit drinking alcohol. Alcohol is not in the same category, in my opinion, as smoking. It is definitely something that can be part of a healthy life. So I want to stress, I am not here to tell everyone to quit drinking. I am also not here to preach. God forbid, I'm going to be the last one to preach to anyone about anything. I'm not here to make people feel bad or guilty. I never want this show to be about that. That is not the point of this show. This show is here to motivate and to encourage and to get you excited and to chase your dreams and to proactively go after having that better tomorrow and that happier tomorrow. That's what it's about. I'm not here to tell you what you should do. I actually kind of hate the word should. Maybe it has some good uses, but I think so often we do that to ourselves. Oh, I should do this. I should do that. You know, do what makes you happy and what's going to make your life better. Don't weigh yourself down with all these should thoughts. I don't like those. Now, some of you who watched the quit smoking episode may say, well, I don't know, you were kind of preaching and guilting there. And you know what? Maybe I did, and I don't care. Smoking is that serious. You know, I'm trying to save a life here, honest to goodness. And I'll do backflips to do that, whatever I have to do. But this show is different. I want this show to be fun. But at the same time, I do think, while I'm not saying that everyone needs to quit drinking, I do think that many of us could benefit from taking a sober look, sorry about the bad pun, at alcohol. And I want to present, the thing is, you know, it's portrayed positively. There's plenty of positive portrayals of alcohol out there. I just want us to make sure that we're looking at the whole picture and that we have all the information and that we can therefore make the best decisions for ourselves so that we do have that better, happier tomorrow. The other thing is, the one thing it does have in common with the smoking episode is I really felt, and because I worried about this episode, I'm worried about stepping on toes or making people, upset or being controversial. But the thing with alcohol is, although it can be a part of a healthy lifestyle, it can also be just disastrous. And, we're going to talk about that. And so I've got to talk about it. As far as having a better and a healthier life tomorrow, we do want to hard to have a happy life if you go into disaster, no matter how you get there. And alcohol is certainly one way that a person can get there. Again, this episode brought to you by the Vols. Does anybody know where we could find a football coach? Sorry, that's not what this show's about. So, I guess a good place to start would be if I tell you a little bit of my own story. I was, I guess we'll say, brought up around alcohol. My family drank, and I was exposed to it. And, I'm just going to lay it all out here. I mean, my mom did something that many of you might not agree with. I don't know if I would agree with it if I was raising a kid today. But her idea, I know, was to demystify alcohol, whatever, or take away the mystery or the romance. I was definitely allowed to have sips when I was young. I mean, like quite young. Certainly wasn't encouraged to drink like an adult at that point. And again, I know, and I'm just telling you the truth. This is how it was. By the time I got to high school, and definitely my friends some of them were drinking at that point, and I was interested in drinking at that point, I guess. And my mom did allow me to drink at home even when I was not of age. And, regardless of what you think about that, regardless of what I think about that, I will say that probably did keep me out of some trouble, because I could have a beer at home. First of all, I think it helped me to, I didn't go nuts when I got out of the house, because I could have it more or less whenever I wanted. So, that probably helped. And also, I was doing at least some of my drinking at home rather than being out and being put in a position where, maybe I was going to be driving or riding with people and that type of thing. So that was the experience when I was young. Now, in spite of all that, I'd love to tell you that, I've been mature about drinking all my life. I didn't get into any major trouble when I didn't get any minor trouble around alcohol in my 20s, but, if I'm being perfectly transparent here, and I want to be, I was a heavy drinker in my 20s. I know probably a lot of folks were, those college years and afterwards. I was putting some down. I definitely was doing that. And, like I say, I didn't get myself in any major trouble or have any major setbacks because of that. But again, being perfectly honest, I probably was in some situations I shouldn't have been in, probably did some things I shouldn't have done, probably used some bad judgment sometimes. So that's definitely a part of that. Once, as I got older, I did get more mature about alcohol, as hopefully most of us do. But at the same time, I still, I can't say that I let the moss grow on the rock, or whatever bad analogy we want to use there. I still drank plenty. I didn't, and the truth is, for a long time, until a visit to my doctor, and gosh, I can't remember how old I was then, when I actually had kind of my first talk with a medical professional about alcohol, I was really kind of ignorant about what I thought. I was a moderate drinker, but after I talked to my doctor, I realized I had no idea what a moderate drinker, what that actually meant. And that's definitely something I'm going to talk about on today's show, because I wonder how many other people out there don't really know what moderate drinking means. It does have an actual definition. It's not just, I feel like I'm a moderate drinker, which is kind of where I was. So I continued to drink. I definitely, like the one thing I said was, I hardly ever, if ever, get drunk anymore. And again, that's a subjective call, I know, but because I'm sure I was feeling good or had a buzz several times, and those are just subjective terms that we use in describing that. But I continued to drink. I continued to enjoy drinking. Not sure when that shifted. Maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, somewhere in that time frame. While I continued to drink, I also started toying with the idea that maybe drinking was hampering me in achieving some of my goals. I certainly wasn't having any sort of, alcoholism type problems, but not even to the point of missing work or any of those serious consequences. But as you probably know from previous episodes, I take my fitness very seriously, and I also enjoy athletics as a hobby. I enjoy doing triathlons, I enjoy doing weightlifting, and I'm competitive enough that I like to do well at those things, or as well as I can do. And I started to wonder if alcohol wasn't hindering me in being the absolute best I could be, I guess is a good way of putting it. So I started wondering about that. I toyed with different things, cutting back, quitting for limited periods of time. I always did pick it back up again, but was toying with things like that. A few months ago, I guess about 6 months ago, I had another change. And keep in mind, this came after the period where I'm thinking, well, should I quit? Should I cut back? And sort of toying with that and experimenting with that. I was out running one day about 6 months ago in the summer and doing a hard run. Well, doing hard intervals, like I've talked about, I liked doing in a past episode, where I was going, I believe I was doing quarter-mile repeats. So I would do a quarter mile pretty much all out, and then a quarter mile at a relaxed pace, and I was alternating those. And on my first or second interval, I didn't feel right. And I thought it was something with my breathing or my lungs. I felt like I was feeling like a burning in my chest, and I felt like I wasn't able to breathe well. I believe that was on the first interval when I was sort of feeling that, and I was like, oh, whoa, that's different. And so on my recovery interval, I really brought it down because I was like, oh, I'm just not feeling right today. So I really went slow for that quarter mile. Then when my next interval was ready to go, I took off, and I very quickly felt just bad again, even worse. I stopped at that point and was kind of doubled over, kind of burning and kind of having a real hard time catching my breath. And I was like, wow, what was that? So obviously the rest of my workout for that day wasn't much. I think I maybe turned around and walked back. I think I may have kept still trying to jog, and that wasn't feeling good. And so that exercise was a bust. Like I say, I thought it was my lungs. It wasn't until I got home and looked at my heart rate data, because when I work out, I usually wear my Garmin watch, which works with a heart rate monitor, and I'm able to download that information to my computer. And what I saw really got my attention. At that point where I'd been doubled over, my heart rate had gone up, according to my watch, to like 250 beats a minute. That's not good. That's outside any normal parameters. So I knew something was going on. I'd only had that happen one other time quite a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and that was when I was just really exerting myself, almost like overexerting myself, and so I chalked it up to that, and it wasn't an ongoing issue, so I sort of discarded that. But that may have been the beginning of this problem. So didn't go to the doctor right away. I was just like, well, that was weird. I'll monitor that, see if that happens again. I thought it might just be a fluke. Went out and ran 2 or 3 more times and didn't have any issues, and so was thinking that maybe it was a fluke. Until the time when I went out and was doing the same thing, and the same thing happened. And I was like, okay, I got to get this checked out. So I went to the doctor, and I apologize. I may be going on a little bit too much about this, so I'll try to speed it up. Went to the doctor, was diagnosed with atrial fibrillation, and also had atrial flutter. And it was interesting because my doctor didn't say anything about this initially, but as soon as I found out that diagnosis, I did some Googling trying to figure out what might have caused that. And there's lots of things. It doesn't even have to be a cause. It can be congenital. But one of the things that was mentioned was alcohol consumption can trigger atrial fibrillation. So I thought, that's interesting. I pretty quickly upon going to the doctor was put on some prescription medication, and alcohol consumption wasn't recommended with some of those. But in addition to that, and the fact of the research that I'd done that seemed to indicate that alcohol might be related to this condition, and the fact that I'd been toying with the idea already, I pretty much made the decision, you know what, I'm going to quit, at least for now until I get some resolution on this. As I continued with my quitting and continued to do research and also looking at some alternative things that I could do that I'll talk about later to sort of replace alcohol, I made the decision that I think this is pretty much going to be a permanent change for me. So that's where I'm at right now. So enough about that story. Again, I'm worried that I've gone on a little too long about my story. I definitely want to get to the meat of this show, which is taking the sober look at alcohol. I want to talk about a balanced picture. Drinking does have some advantages and some disadvantages, and I want to take a moment to sort of run through those. So some of the advantages, there are some health advantages that seem to exist for moderate alcohol consumption. All-cause mortality does seem to be lower in some studies for moderate drinkers versus even teetotalers. Alcohol is related to improvements or decrease in risk of things like heart disease, diabetes, and stroke. Now, those can be a kind of a double-edged sword, as we'll talk about a little bit later. Red wine in particular is chock full of antioxidants. Resveratrol, I believe, is the main one. I think we all know that antioxidants are something that's good for us. Not going to go into that in detail in this show. May do that in a future show. And then let's talk about the real advantages to alcohol. Probably the real reasons why those of us who do it. And I don't think it's like, well, it's because of the health benefits. No, come on. We do it because it's fun. We do it because it's relaxing. We do it because we like the taste. We do it because it serves as a social lubricant, for want of a better word, can relax us in stressful situations and make us a little more perhaps easygoing and a little less tense. Those are the real reasons why I think that those of us who drink do so and enjoy it and have no desire to give it up because of those benefits that we get. And that's great. Probably some other advantages that just at a moment's thought I'm not thinking of, but those are the big ones that occur to me. So now, as continuing our sober look, let's look at some of the disadvantages of alcohol consumption. And maybe in my notes I didn't break these down as well as I should have, because we got to look at two categories here. I think we have to look at the disadvantages of moderate alcohol consumption, or the possible disadvantages, and then also the ones that are not going to affect you if it's just moderate alcohol use, but if it's not moderate alcohol use, some very obvious dangers there that we want to talk about. So the top one that occurs to me is liver disease. I think everybody knows that alcohol is tough on your liver, and definitely heavy use is. Hopefully moderate is not going to be a problem. But I did uncover a very interesting statistic in researching today's show that I didn't know, and that is that 90% of drinkers, and this is even light and moderate drinkers, probably have fatty liver. And this, I guess, is not, and again, I didn't do tons of research into this as far as how bad fatty liver is. I think it's more a precursor kind of thing. Can be a precursor to problems, not necessarily a problem in itself. I do know if you quit drink, it's like pretty much totally reversible if you quit drinking, if I understand that correctly. But I thought that was interesting that even light and moderate drinkers, 90% of them have fatty liver. Cancer is a disadvantage with drinking, and this one is kind of a little gray. I've definitely seen some information that says that breast cancer risk in particular is increased even with light drinking. So that's we've got to say that's a concern to be aware of. Pancreatitis is a disadvantage of alcohol consumption, can lead to that. If you already have underlying cardiovascular issues, not so much that alcohol can cause those, but if you have those, it can interact with those in a not good way, a way that's not going to make your life better. It can play into high blood pressure. So those, I guess, are enough of the disease disadvantages for now. Let's just be real honest here, and let's look at some of the other disadvantages. Here's a big one, and one that we don't like to think about and maybe talk about: drunk driving. This is obviously a huge problem, and this is where we're getting into where alcohol consumption can be not just bad, but disastrous. And let's be honest here. You don't have to be a heavy drinker for this to be an issue. You can be just a little over the line. Your responses are going to be affected in a bad way, and this could turn into disaster. We don't want that to happen. So let's be real mindful and thoughtful and careful about that if we drink. Obviously very serious. I don't think I have to preach to you on that one. How about weight management? There can be a disadvantage. Alcohol can and especially beer. They don't call it a beer belly for nothing. Beer has tons of calories, and I guess wine has even more, but I think you drink less wine, so I think that actually beer comes out the bad guy in that comparison. Do you think wine is going to be better there for you? Spirits, I guess, are good too if you drink them straight or with water. Now you start mixing them with Coca-Cola. That's not going to help your calorie situation or your health situation. Some of the things, again, that we might not like to think about, especially if we're just light or moderate drinkers, how about how it can affect your judgment sometimes? How about how, that social lubricant part, that's the good part, but what about when it gets to the part where you do things that maybe weren't the smartest things the next day when you're thinking back on them, or the things that maybe you're embarrassed about or ashamed about? That's part of it. That's part of it. If we're taking a clear, truthful look at it, that's something we have to think about. Here's one I really relate to. How about it can make it harder for you to do the other things that you need and want to do for your healthy lifestyle, like exercise? I ran into this where if I had a little, even maybe one or two too many the night before, the next morning, that exercise, I was feeling it a lot less because the drinking was making me not feel as good, maybe a slight hangover or whatever. So that's something to think about. It doesn't have to be a crippling hangover to be something that's not making our life better. So I think that's a good way of putting that. Now this is another big one, and this it can mess up your sleep, and sleep is so important, and it can mess up your sleep. I know, again, that I think I was having some mild problems with this, where it was affecting my sleep a little bit in a bad way. Not to mention that it can make you sleepy. The good old day drinking, the having a few mimosas or screwdrivers or Bloody Marys with the brunch. How many times have you done that? And then in the afternoon, you just want to lay down and not accomplish anything. So that's a thing to think about. It's dehydrating. Alcohol is dehydrating, so that can make it more difficult to stay hydrated, which as soon as I say the word hydrate, I have to hydrate. Low energy, I've already talked about that. Your mental clarity. These are subtle ways that drinking can affect you. I'm not saying it's necessarily a problem for everybody, or maybe it's a minor enough problem that you're okay with the trade-off. I'm just saying these are things to think about and be mindful of. How about how drinking can age you? It can age your skin. I think you've probably seen examples of this. And again, is that only if you drink heavy, or does moderate age you a little bit? I'm not sure, but it's something to think about and to be mindful of. Okay, here's one. It's expensive. Drinking is expensive. Oh my gosh, especially if you're doing it out at a restaurant or a club. Man, they mark that stuff up crazy, and that's true. You can definitely save some by drinking at home, but yeah, it's an expensive habit, so make sure it's worth it to you. Okay, I'm sort of rearranging my notes here as we go. Another point I want to make, we've talked about advantages and disadvantages. How about the ones, and I teased this earlier, how about the things that can swing both ways? And this is interesting about alcohol. There are some conditions where moderate alcohol consumption does seem to be helpful, makes you less likely to have those problems, but it tips, and heavy drinking can cause those or exacerbate those exact same problems. So conditions we're talking about here are things like stroke, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and dementia. These are 4 diseases where moderate drinking may be helpful and beneficial. Heavy drinking, definitely not. So, and again, I apologize here. As I said, I'm sort of moving things around as I'm going here, because I don't want to gloss over the fact that the thing we're talking about here is that alcohol need not be disastrous, but it can be. I certainly know, especially as I've gotten older, I've seen more and more lives of people I cared about, in a lot of cases, whose lives were either disastrously so, or maybe even in a subtler way, but it was clear that their lives were definitely negatively impacted by alcohol. That's the point I'm trying to make. And so obviously that's the boat that we don't want to end up in, whether we've got a huge problem with it or whether it's not a huge problem, but it's still not a net positive in our lives. That's what we're going for. We want the net positive. So we have to think about things too, like depression, which of course, if serious enough, can lead to suicide. So I mean, that's another way that this can be disastrous, and so often that alcohol has led to that. I guess the main point that I want to make here, and this is something I've said for years, and I did say this even before I stopped drinking, which was, I guess, in August. I always said, even when I was drinking, okay, I drink now and I enjoy drinking and it's not a huge problem for me and that's fine. But I said, knowing what I now know and having seen the things I've seen, if the clock was turned back to before I ever had that first alcoholic drink, I am pretty sure that I would never have taken that first drink. I just wouldn't have been willing to take the chance, seeing the road that it can lead to. Not the road that it has to lead to, but the road it can lead to. I wouldn't have taken the chance. And I guess that's going to be one of my messages to folks out there who have never drunk. That would be my advice. Think long and hard if you're considering starting drinking or taking that first drink. Think long and hard about whether that's worth the risk or not. And certainly don't be thinking, oh, well, it has some health benefits, so I'm going to start. No, there's not an expert in the world that would tell you to start drinking if you don't drink now just for the health benefits. Nobody would tell you that, and I won't tell you that. Maybe I should have said this part earlier in the show. To me, maybe this is kind of the dramatic moment I was trying to build to. I want to talk about what moderate drinking is and what heavy drinking is, because I think a lot of people don't know. I teased earlier, I had a conversation with the doctor, and I can't even remember how it came up. I guess maybe he asked me how much I drank, and I told him, and he's like, well, that's heavy. And I was like, well, it is. I didn't think it was heavy. Moderate drinking does have an actual numerical definition, and it's going to be based on the number of drinks. So the number of drinks obviously depends on what you're drinking. I believe it's 12 ounces for beer, 5 ounces for wine, and I believe it's 1.5 ounces for spirits, for liquor. So that's a serving. So the question is, how many servings are you drinking? If you are a man, moderate drinking is no more than 2 drinks per day, which is 14 per week. For women, it's cut in half, I guess, because of the lower body weight. It is 1 drink per day, or 7 in a week. If you are a man drinking more than 14 drinks per week, if you are a woman drinking more than 7 drinks per week, I hate to break it to you, by the medical definition, you are not a moderate drinker. And so that's just information to be aware of. Now, does this mean that you can drink once a week and have 14 drinks? No, of course not. The most liberal definition I can give you is that if you're a woman, you should never have more than 3 in a day, and if you're a man, you should never have more than 4. And even that's, probably pushing it, to be honest. But you should never go above that level unless you're ready to be a heavy drinker and to have the negative possibilities that brings. So, very important point. Oh, one more point I want to make. I said I wasn't going to tell anybody to quit drinking or not drink, but there are some exceptions. Hopefully, self or common sense. I think everybody knows, if you are pregnant, do not drink. If you have liver or pancreas disease, do not drink. If you have heart failure or you've been told that you have a weak heart, do not drink. If you have ever had a hemorrhagic stroke, do not drink. And the one that's depending on how I word this, there's a couple different ways I can say this, but if you have any alcoholic tendencies whatsoever, obviously you should not drink. And here's the tough one that some folks may not like. If you have a strong family history of alcoholism, I cannot say anything else in good conscience except do not drink. That's too risky. That's too risky. So we're on our 30-minute mark. Let's talk about resources. I changed my mind. I'm going to talk about tools first. There are some actual tools that I have used that have been very helpful to me in my desire to quit drinking alcohol completely. And this is the greatest thing, because I literally feel like I didn't give up anything, almost nothing, and I still get all the good stuff that I loved about drinking and that I enjoyed about drinking. So, I mean, you talk about a win-win. I got rid of the potential bad, and I still have almost all of the good. So here are my tools. The first one is a product by Sutter Home, the vineyard that some of you may be familiar with, and it's called Free, F-R-E. Yes, there is non-alcoholic wine. I had no idea. I know locally here you can get it at Bob's. If you're outside the Knoxville area, look for it, but it's made by Sutter Home. They have several varieties. It's just like real wine, except it just doesn't have alcohol. They have a Merlot. I believe there's a White Zin, and one that I'm forgetting, a blush or a rosé. I can't remember. I think that maybe that's the third one. Seems like I've seen a fourth one too. Oh, I think there's a champagne too. But anyway, Free. That's a tool. The other tool because I always probably was more of a beer drinker than a wine drinker. You know, I knew there were non-alcoholic beers, and I knew about O'Doul's and Sharps, which to me tasted like probably Bud and Miller or whatever. And sorry, I'm turning my nose up. You know, I hate it if you're a Miller or a Bud fan. You know, I was one of those beer snobs that liked those fancier beers. Well, I was very happy to discover that there are some more craft beer options out there that are non-alcoholic, and they're pretty easy to find. I was surprised. Probably my favorite is Beck's, and when I realized they made a non-alcoholic beer, because I drank their alcoholic beer back in the day and enjoyed it, and the thing is, the non-alcoholic wines, they taste close enough to wine, but you can kind of tell that there's not alcohol in there. It tastes just a little different. It's still good to me, and I still enjoy it, but you can tell. With the beer, I almost don't know if you can tell. It tastes like beer. The non-alcoholic Beck's taste like Beck's. So that's great. And I've found that locally at Kroger. I don't know if all the Krogers have it. Well, actually, I know they don't, because I've been to one Kroger that didn't. But that's a good place where you can find Beck's. Excuse me. Another one is Klausthaler, which is a German beer, and I love German beers. And I found that at Trader Joe's, and I'm guessing maybe that's pretty consistent throughout the country, maybe. Another one is Erdinger, I guess is how you pronounce it, and I found that one at Whole Foods. That's another German beer. So those are all good ones. I think the Beck's is my favorite. But what a great tool, right? Okay, the resource. We've got one resource today, and this is going to tie in with the daily challenge that I end every episode with, because the resource is a website that actually has challenge in the name. It is the 30-day no alcohol challenge. You can probably Google that, but I'll give it to you anyway. It's 30, so in other words, the number 30 day noalcoholchallenge.com. That is your daily challenge. Consider taking the 30-day no alcohol challenge. Why not? Go read the website, see the benefits that the guy that started that got from quitting for 30 days. Now I'm going to go ahead and tell you, he did decide to quit permanently, and he explains why. But, you know, that's not what this site is about. This site is about doing it for 30 days and seeing what it's like. We've talked in previous episodes about experimenting. I think this is a cool experiment, and I encourage y'all to try it. I mean, why not? Why not see what it's like? And then if after 30 days you're like, no, I'm going to go back to drinking, then that's cool. All right, that's our show for today. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe. You know I love pointing. Subscribe right there. It's free. Do it. Why not? Share the show. Share it with your friends. Sign up for our email list at our website, alwaysbetterchallenge.com. Questions. If you have a question you would like addressed on a future show or just a question in general, please feel free. You can comment on the YouTube video or hit us up on social media. Suggestions about the show, feedback about the show. We have a Facebook group for the show. You can find that by going on Facebook/Always Better Challenge and going to the community section. So again, thank you so much for watching the Always Better Challenge show. I'm your host, Joe Bedford. Until next time, go out there and make it happen.